Your local election headquarters will begin momentarily.
It's Florida primary election night, and WFLA is your local election headquarters. The marquee matchup, the Democratic primary for governor, Nikki Fried versus Charlie Crist for the right to face Governor Ron DeSantis in November. Our live streaming coverage of that race, plus all your Tampa Bay congressional races and everything else tonight, begins right now. Welcome, folks. Evan Donovan, joined here by State Representative Mike Beltran and former congressional candidate Chris Hunter. Great to see you both.
Thanks for having us, Evan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you back in here. And also our digital anchor, JB Biunno, across the desk from me tonight. It's our first time on this new desk. JB, great work here.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Let's get right to it.
All right, let's get right to it. You're going to see results streaming across your screen here throughout the evening. You'll see us in the bottom right-hand corner right there. Obviously, it is early. Polls just closed in the majority of the state at 7 o'clock. There are still, obviously, parts of the panhandle where polls are still open, so we won't begin to see full results until at the earliest 8 o'clock. But as you can see, a lot of results piling in so far. Looks like about 1 million votes, maybe 900,000 votes in the Florida governor's race so far. 10% of precincts reporting, and Charlie Crist with a very strong lead right here over Nikki Fried. This really mirrors the latest polling that we saw from St. Pete polls and from pretty much everyone else, except for that University of North Florida poll that was sort of an outlier, most political experts think, that showed Nikki very close, even up in that race. Gentlemen, we'll start with you. Chris, I mean, is this any surprise to you?
It's not, and I would expect that this margin holds throughout the balance of the night. You know, if there is any surprise, I actually think it's the last election, and if there's any outlier here, I actually think it's a bit of an outlier that Nikki Fried's even ag commissioner to begin with.
That's very interesting. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the perception, certainly inside baseball, was that Crist was always the front runner, and it's now 7:25 p.m. on election night. She hasn't caught up yet, and at this point, I'm really not sure that she does. I think we were talking before we went live that the type of people who are going to vote early and by mail might even, be those that you would expect to favor Commissioner Fried, and in fact, they have not. And so, is she going to be able to catch up with this type of a deficit at this stage? Just looking at the election day results, I think that the odds are kind of running against her at this point.
Yeah, we certainly see in most elections that more progressive voters tend to vote early. I don't know that it holds as much in a primary, but sort of, I was sort of thinking the same way you do. We'll see how that works out as we go through the evening here. This is House District 15, another interesting race on the Democratic side. Alan Cohn, who's a former candidate, ran for this seat in 2020, lost that seat to now Republican Congressman Scott Franklin, who has shifted over to run in Florida's new District 18, which sort of covers the middle of the state there. Here we go with what I think could be the tightest race of the night. House District 13 on the Republican side, Ana Paulina Luna, who is the Trump-endorsed candidate. Really, people thought she could run away with this race because of the fact she was endorsed by Trump, but Kevin Hazlett, a former prosecutor, making it interesting here. Looks like 24% of precincts reporting here. That's pretty significant. That lead, though, very tight, obviously. You're only talking about 2,000 votes, so we're going to have to watch that one. I think that race could go into the late evening.
That could go into the evening. I saw the three front runners in that race at the Sunshine Summit in late July, and each one of them put in a very solid performance. It was really anyone's game at that point. Obviously, again, you kind of have Luna, the presumptive front runner with the Trump endorsement, but you also have Hazlett and Maki with very solid fundraising. Maki's run before, so she had some name recognition, and then Hazlett obviously had a record in the community. So that one, I note a little bit of separation as the election day results. It was about a point or two, and now it's separated to 3 or 4 points. But that just depends which precincts come in But that's definitely one of the more watched races, and that'll continue, I think, for the next few hours.
Yeah, I think that'll be very interesting. JB, obviously keeping your eye on the comments over there. And before we go back to you, let's take a little look at this race right here, House District 15. This is technically Florida's new congressional district, the 28th seat now in Florida due to the growth in population. So these results, obviously very early, not seeing many votes here, but Laurel Lee with a strong lead. That was what the latest polling showed, that she was going to be far ahead here, and it looks like she is sort of in the commanding position, at least as we move into the later parts of the evening. JB, what are you seeing from people online?
Yeah, letting you know, folks, that we, of course, are paying attention to your comments on social media here from the Stream Center. You can use any of the hashtags on your screen, most notably hashtag HeyEvan, hashtag HeyJB. We've also got an interactive poll running. And it brings us to our featured question of the night. Who is the tougher opponent for Governor Ron DeSantis in November? Is it the former Governor Charlie Crist? Is it the Ag Commissioner Nikki Fried? As we look here again at live results that are updating on your screen, Evan.
And as we wait for you all, the viewers, to answer that question, I'm fascinated to see what you choose. Chris, let me go to you. I mean, what do you think in terms, if you're Ron DeSantis, who would you least rather face in November?
Well, let me first start by observing what is probably obvious to anybody who's halfway paying attention. I think Governor DeSantis is going to be reelected, regardless of who the Democratic nominee is. But I do think that Charlie presents a more difficult opponent for him. And as between the two leading candidates, Charlie is the one who, if either of them could give him a run for his money come November, Charlie is the one who could do it.
What do you think led to the fact that Democrats have put forward and look likely to possibly elect a former Republican governor as their standard bearer to go against DeSantis in 2022? Do you think that's maybe some backlash from what happened with Andrew Gillum, losing a tight race and then obviously, a fall from grace for him? But where do you think that comes from?
To go in the way back machine in 2018, if Gwen Graham had been the Democratic Party's nominee, I think that she could have and probably would have beaten Ron DeSantis. But thanks to a negative mail campaign by two of her Democratic primary opponents and an infatuation with somebody who was really never ready for running statewide, the Democratic Party ended up nominating somebody who came really close, but then had some problems that surfaced later. It didn't reflect well more broadly on the Democratic Party, which I think then turned swing and new voters off, giving Governor DeSantis an opportunity to both create and then cement an even larger base of support.
I think that's a great read of what happened. Mike, what do you think?
Well, I'll say a couple of things, actually. I agree with you. First of all, Ron DeSantis will win in November. That's very clear. And the corollary to that is it really doesn't matter who the nominee is on the Democratic side. If I had to pick, I would say Nikki Fried would be easier to beat. The reason is Charlie, he's a very affable man. It's his policies that I think people from my side don't like, or it's maybe the fact that he's moved his policies a few times over the years. He's a very affable guy. He comes across well on television. I've never met him personally. I've met the commissioner, and I've spoken to the commissioner and frankly tweeted with the commissioner. The commissioner just has a little bit more of a combative approach to me, to the governor, to the rest of the cabinet, and frankly to her political opponents. And so whether that would resonate as well with the voters, I think we have the answer in the primary, but we'll see as the night goes on if those results hold. But I think Crist probably would do a little bit better, and that's what the polling shows. Crist 3 or 4 points ahead of Nikki against the governor.
And I think the interesting part of you saying that, Mike, is that combativeness is certainly a part of. It's definitely a part of the governor's strategy, right? And he's used it to great effect. I don't know that it resonates as well with Democratic voters. Actually, Chris, I'd be interested to see what your read is of that.
So, if I may, I'm going to read a quote from a voter in Miami that I saw in the Washington Post today. Sure. After Yvonne Perez cast her vote, and the story in the Post indicated that she voted for Charlie Crist in the primary, she began to second-guess her decision, and here's her quote: "But politics has become so one way or another, so maybe no one is in the middle anymore," Perez added. And I find that really compelling, and Ms. Perez, a really insightful observation. Politics seems to have become so one way or the other, and not only that, but in a very aggressive, hostile, antagonistic way. So, Mike's of course right that Commissioner Fried is a more antagonistic candidate than I think Charlie Crist is. But Governor DeSantis is obviously governed as a very antagonistic governor, and I don't know that that's a good approach for the sort of the state more broadly. You know, I like the idea of what Ms. Perez observed. Like, gosh, there's got to be some sort of middle ground, both in tone and in substance. Right? And Charlie's policies, as we all know, over the years, although he can be criticized for shape-shifting, you know, they've more or less been center-right, center-left.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty moderate Democrat in that way.
I guess I'm going to take exception to that in the sense that the governor's been governor for 4 years. There was the pre-coronavirus, and then there was the post-coronavirus administration. We kind of divide those eras. I've dealt with the governor consistently throughout, and he's actually done something that previous Republican governors have not been able to do, which is he's had a great relationship with the legislature. And he's been able to get his legislative priorities through. He's been able to deliver for the voters and for the constituents in a way that previous governors have not. And he's been able to implement most, if not all, of his legislative agenda. So he works very well within Tallahassee. And I think he resonates with the voters, which is why you're going to see a wider margin in November than you would otherwise expect or that you have seen in elections past in Florida.
What do you attribute that to? Why is he able to work with you all as legislators better than, say, Rick Scott was?
I think because DeSantis and Trump and some of my colleagues in the House, quite frankly, we've kind of tapped into something, which is that we're not part of the establishment. We're going to do what we think is right, and we're going to take our hits. We're going to take our hits from the right, middle, and center. But the left certainly left that out. But that's where we take most of our hits from, of course. But we're going to take our hits, but we're going to do what's right, and then the voters are going to decide whether to reelect us. And if not, then we'll go back to doing what we were doing before. And I think that's a little bit different than what you've seen. And I'm not being critical of the other folks, but it's a little bit different governing style than other folks who are more poll driven, more kind of day to day, as opposed to here are 3 or 4 guiding principles: limited government, individual liberty, separation of powers, and low taxes. And then I'm going to use those to figure out what to do in any particular situation. And so I think that is, especially in coronavirus, right? It's just individual liberty. We follow the Constitution. We keep going. Obviously, we're reasonable about precautions, but we don't do crazy things like California and New York. That's resonated with the voters.
I certainly think, though, that Chris's point about people getting lost in the middle continues to be the story, I think, of these past few elections, and I see it moving forward. Until there's some sort of unifying element or candidate that sort of speaks to people who are, well, I mean, you could argue that Joe Biden got elected purely on that alone, right? I think there were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump because they wanted something different, someone out of the norm, someone out of the mainstream, and then maybe didn't like what they saw and went back and voted for President Biden.
I think 2020 was right, wrong, or indifferent. It was cast as a referendum on Trump. And Trump didn't do as well as maybe he would have if the election were cast as another topic. For example, a referendum on Biden or Pelosi or somebody like that. This election is very much going to be
But most incumbent elections are like that, right?
Most incumbent elections are, and I think that this election is going to be a resounding yes referendum on DeSantis. And frankly, neither Fried nor Charlie, they haven't put anything forward other than we don't like DeSantis and that we're going to do kind of your standard tax and spend liberal policies. They haven't really put an alternate vision, and I don't think they're going to do that in the next 9 weeks.
Chris, I know you've met Charlie in person, and he is as affable and as good of a retail politician as anyone that I have ever met. I mean, when it comes to shaking hands and kissing babies, Charlie's at the top of the list. But is it going to resonate with voters beyond today's primary if he should come out as the candidate?
A few things. First, Charlie's affability, I think, is genuine and is in short supply in public life these days.
Totally agree.
I'm glad that Charlie decided to run, and I hope that between now and November, he has the chance to sort of reintroduce himself to a lot of voters, because a lot of voters statewide are either new to Florida or don't really remember when he was a statewide elected official. They have a chance to come to know Charlie all over again. He can benefit, of course, from his name recognition, but he does offer, in my view, a different brand altogether of political figure than the sort of slashing and burning approach that politicians on the left and on the right seem to find most beneficial to their political ambitions these days.
Yeah, it certainly sells. Let's go to digital anchor JB Biunno. What's up over there, bud?
Hey there, guys. Check this out. So these are our live poll results. Hundreds of votes have come in. Which Democratic candidate has the best chance of defeating Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida? Of course, in November, we've got 71% of our audience voting Charlie Crist, 29% of our audience voting for Nikki Fried. Those are live results updating on your screen. You can continue to vote on the WFLA Facebook page. A couple of predictions from NBC News. We've got Scott Franklin winning the U.S. House Republican primary in Florida's 18th congressional district. We've also got, no surprise, Kathy Castor winning Florida's 14th congressional district on the Democratic side. We've also got Vern Buchanan winning U.S. House Republican primary in Florida's 16th congressional district. This all according to NBC News projections. And Evan, we've also got our own Justin Shecker standing by at the Charlie Crist camp. Let's check in with Justin Shecker. Hey there, Justin. What's the latest there from Charlie Crist camp?
Hey there. Hey there, JB and Evan. Good evening to you both. Yeah, still no sign of Congressman Crist. I've seen a lot of staffers from his campaign running around with some smiles on their faces. Those first results have come in showing Charlie Crist with about 60% of the vote, with 24% of the vote reporting so far. So they have about 250 guests expected here tonight. We're live at a hotel here in downtown St. Pete in Charlie Crist's hometown. What you can't see to my left, guys, they're probably 50 to 60 TV news crews from across the state, from Miami, Orlando, Palm Beach. They've all come here to the Bay Area to cover Charlie Crist's primary election night party. Again, it's looking like a good night so far for the congressman.
And Justin, what is the vibe like in the room there? I mean, how are people feeling there tonight? Are you getting some sort of sense of what their outlook is?
I've seen a lot of smiles, Evan, on the faces of Charlie Crist campaign staffers. They're feeling very good about tonight. We've also seen some other politicians.
That's all right.
And Justin, if you can hear us, I believe that we've lost your shot. A lot of course, television stations competing for real estate, broadband real estate up there at the Charlie Crist camp. Justin, we'll try to check back in with you later. We lost your shot. Evan, back to you. These are live results. We are now up to 35% in and a widening lead for the former governor of Florida, Charlie Crist.
Yeah, and I think this is what we expected. I think it's what a lot of people expected. Obviously Nikki gave it, her all, was really traipsing all over the state in the last few days and weeks, really trying to drum up some support. I'm curious, Chris, I'll go to you for this one first. There was this sort of belief that, especially I think after the Kansas vote on abortion rights, in deep red Kansas, when 60% of voters decided that they would not take away or put into the state constitution that there was no right to an abortion, that there might be this backlash, that there might be some sort of uprising, if you will, against what has happened with the overturning of Roe v. Wade and states restricting abortion, and that could favor a candidate like Nikki Fried. Did you ever think that was true, or how did you assess that?
No, I think the Democratic Party overstates the ability to turn out ever more Democrats in response to issues like that. And this is another example of predictions about a great wave of support for indisputably the superior pro-choice candidates between the two Democrats. There isn't going to be some upswelling of voter support for Nikki Fried because she has a stronger pro-choice position than Charlie Crist does. But that's not surprising. I mean, the Democratic Party has a challenge that it has to overcome, which is the cultural elements that are ascendant in today's Democratic Party are not necessarily in touch with, I think, a broader-based electorate, which doesn't think about things like this sort of day in and day out and isn't motivated solely by one issue such that that's going to motivate them to the polls in outsized numbers.
And this is sort of that traditional argument that Democrats don't talk about pocketbook issues enough, that they're talking more about cultural issues than they should?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's cultural issues, but it's more than that. I mean, The Democrats, I think, in part, missed an opportunity after the Dobbs decision because there was a large number of national Democrats that were sort of taking the maximalist position on abortion instead of thinking about, maybe where the majority of the country is. I mean, the majority of the country does support a woman's right to choose, with limitations. And then the challenge is, all right, well, what are those limitations? What's reasonable? What's appropriate? What makes sense? That's where the debate is and should be. But I think there's some people in the Democratic Party who scream too loudly for the maximum position. And as with everything else, it is a way to turn off a lot of people and demotivate them.
I interviewed, after interviewing multiple Republican candidates for weeks in the lead up to the primary, Mike, on this past week's show on Battleground Florida, I interviewed Eddie Geller and Alan Cohn in District 15, who are both running for the Democratic primary, pushed them both hard on where they thought the line should be drawn on abortion rights, and both said that it should be up to a woman and her doctor and no legislative interference whatsoever. I think to Chris's point, abortion rights are definitely popular with the majority of Americans. I mean, 60%, 67%, whatever number you come out on. But where you draw the weeks does tend to be important, because I don't think people look at it, most people in America, as an unlimited right.
I would draw a distinction between abortion rights, as the two of you have said, being popular with a majority of Americans, and saying that perhaps some segment of the middle is a little bit uncomfortable with a complete ban. I think there's a difference. Nobody's excited about abortion except the left.
No, which is why I said abortion rights, not abortion itself.
So I think
but aren't we saying the same thing? How are we saying it?
Well, I think what we're saying is that I think there are some people in the middle, the swing voters, who are uncomfortable both with abortion on demand that you see in New York and the outright bans. I'm just speaking objectively, okay?
Yeah.
I recognize there's people who have a different view than I do. I think there's about 40%, which is the Republican voters, the loyal Republicans. They want to ban abortion or come pretty close to that. And then I think there's 20 or 30% in the middle. And then I think there's 30% who adopt the Planned Parenthood stance. I think that 30% in the middle, you all were talking about pocketbook issues. I don't think those people have already decided we're going to go, we might vote for a Republican, we might vote for a Democrat. Those type of people are not going to be voting based on abortion, because if they were voting based on abortion, they wouldn't be those swing voters who are voting on pocketbook issues like that. I think in terms of...
Is that why you read the Kansas result as why it passed? Because if you take just the issue of abortion rights and you put that to voters, then you're going to get a much different answer than you would whether those people will support a Republican or Democrat.
I think that's right. I think that the voters will elect a pro-life Republican to go up to Tallahassee and do abortion regulation when they might not get, we have a 60% threshold, remember, here in Florida, where you might not get that 60% at the ballot box on a one issue, because like I said, a lot of people are pocketbook voters, and they're just not as concerned about abortion the way that the party core is. The reason that Nikki Fried didn't do well tonight, or hasn't done well so far tonight, is because she's in a Democratic primary. Those people are the most liberal part of the Democratic Party, and they're already excited about abortion, and they're already turning out for that. So you're not going to bake any more of that in with something like Dobbs. Maybe you see that in the general, but I submit to you that the Republican majorities here in Florida have been elected for a generation promising to do pro-life legislation, and they were elected on that basis. And Ron DeSantis was elected on that basis, and they're not going to start losing elections by going to Tallahassee and doing what they said they were going to do. And I think that applies to the governor race as well.
I think that depends on how far they restrict it. So we'll see about that. I mean, let's be honest. The vast majority of abortions happen within the first trimester. You all passed a 15-week abortion ban this year, and 94% of abortions are done in the first trimester in the state of Florida. And because we know they're front loaded, even more are done within the next 3 weeks to make it up to 15. So you're looking at probably 97% of abortions.
And that's why I think that all of the brouhaha about the 15-week ban is overblown, because we only banned 6%. And so all this hand-wringing about that it was supposedly, we're actually the most lenient, and I'm sorry to say this, we're the most lenient state in the South. People come here from Georgia and Alabama and elsewhere because the laws are less stringent here than they are in the rest of the South. And I think that's a problem. I know people disagree, but I think it's a problem.
I have a feeling you guys will be dealing with it come January.
We sure will.
More on that later. That's a good tease. JB, what's going on over there?
One more time, just want to let folks know that we're paying attention to what they're saying on the WFLA Facebook page, also as well on the WFLA YouTube page. I see we've got Rebecca, we've got Polly, we've got Tesla. We've got a lot of folks joining us here on the WFLA YouTube page. These are live results, and I think we can close out this poll at 70% of our poll respondents believe that Charlie Crist is the better opponent or has the better chance of defeating Governor DeSantis in Florida in November. We've got these live results again, folks, that continue to populate on your screen of the big race here. Of course, the Democratic primary for Florida governor. We've got 42% of the result in, and it is a pretty significant lead for Charlie Crist. Nikki Fried trailing several 100,000 votes currently with the live results, with still more than half of the votes still outstanding. Speaking of Nikki Fried, let's check in with our correspondent at the Nikki Fried camp, Jack Royer, standing by with the very latest. Jack, what are the results that you're hearing there from the Fried camp?
JB, we're not really getting to talk to the Fried camp right now because they are not around since the numbers started to come in. The campaign staff was around here. I want to just show you this room to give you a perspective that it is mostly members of the media at this point. I really haven't seen a large number of supporters. There are maybe 20 or 30 in the back that have been eating some food. She pulled up in a bus. I believe she was on the bus. I'm speculating. I have not seen her with my eyes tonight, but I believe based on the people, the members of the staff that I know work closely with her, they got off the bus. I think she's on the property. I've been told that she is. But you ask about the mood in the room, what I'm hearing. Up until 7 o'clock Eastern time, we were hearing a lot of confident, they felt like it was going to be a close race. They were hearing that there had been high turnout in many precincts across the state from their poll watchers and from volunteers. Over 800 of them have been working for this campaign. I assume that they are holed up somewhere watching these numbers, but again, no familiar faces are in this room tonight. Nothing about this room has changed since they arrived, and as I noted, we've not seen Nikki Fried. So I think it's certainly not as close as they seemed to think it would be at this point, but we should know more, correct me if I'm wrong, in about 10 minutes or 15 minutes when the polls close, in the Panhandle as well. That is those counties that are on Central Time. So right now it's about the same as when it started. They're just playing Lady Gaga.
Jack, let me ask you a question. Evan Donovan here. Jack, have you seen supporters leave, or have there never really been that many supporters there? Were you sort of watching them walk out, or that's never really been a part of the evening thus far?
To be honest, it's been mostly members of the media. We've seen staff members arrive, people who are, I mean, you've covered plenty of campaigns. You know what I mean when I say you can tell who's working for the campaign versus supporters. There have not been people who've just shown up to be here that I have seen. There may be a few in the back. When I say a few, I mean just a few. And you notice some staff members walking around here. So to answer your question, Evan, I would say there are probably 30 to 40 different media people here, from producers to photographers to reporters. NBC News is here. I don't see any other network correspondents here right now, but there is interest at the national level. I talked to a correspondent from Fox News who's here. I found this interesting. He said he was supposed to go cover Charlie Crist, but in the last few days, he said producers at Fox News decided that this race might be one to watch. They wanted to be here. Based on recent polling and recent energy they felt like the Fried campaign had, the momentum. So to answer your question, Evan, I've not seen anyone that jumped out as they're a supporter in terms of people that were not working for the campaign. So I would say the energy is subdued at this point, but hard for me to say they're optimistic or confident, because as I note, all the people that were here an hour ago are nowhere to be seen, at least to my eyes and my camera.
All right, Jack Royer, live for us from the Nikki Fried camp tonight. Let us know if that situation changes. Appreciate you, Jack. JB?
Will do.
All right, guys, we're back here. I want to kind of cycle through the races as we stay here with you live in the WFLA Now Stream Center. We, of course, have been showing you and very heavily focused on the Crist Fried race, but let's cycle through some others. Really no surprise with 46% in as far as the U.S. Senate Democratic primary. We've got a runaway, really, with Val Demings picking up so far 1 million votes, 85% of the vote, with 46% precincts reporting. We've also got the District 13 race right now. Evan was noting how this one, of course, being one of the more fascinating races, and it's Anna Paulina Luna with a pretty sizable lead. And look at the precincts reporting there, 97%. Continuing to cycle through, We'll go up next to U.S. House District 14 on the Republican side. 2/3 of the precincts reporting, and it's James Judge holding a sizable lead over Jerry Torres. Continuing through, let's go over to District 15. It's Laurel Lee with 43.5% of the vote, with just over half of precincts reporting. Kelly Stargell, Jackie Toledo in second and third, respectively. And then lastly, we'll check in on the Democratic side in District 15, and 55% of precincts reporting now. It's Alan Cohn with more than a third of the vote there, but still perhaps a chance, depending on how this race shapes up with the 45% left outstanding. But of course, the big race that we're focusing in on, Crist versus Fried, 46% precincts reporting. We're waiting for the next batch of votes coming in, Evan. Let's
go from the top down here. Why don't you go over to that U.S. Senate race on the Democratic side? Obviously, this is the right to face Marco Rubio in November. There was never any doubt that it was going to be Val Demings tonight. Let's talk about this race, though, guys. Chris, I'll go to you first. Outwardly speaking, particularly from a national perspective, it would seem that Val Demings is a great candidate for Democrats. Obviously, strong law enforcement background, former chief of police in Orlando, law enforcement officer for 27 years. Her husband was the mayor of Orange County, also a law enforcement officer. She clearly not someone that you can say supports defunding the police. Do you think she's got a shot at Marco Rubio in November?
Yeah, 100%. Val Demings is the real deal. I had thought about bringing one prop tonight. I didn't, but it's my Val Demings coffee mug that has the chief on one side with a picture of her in her uniform. And it's hard to imagine, from my perspective, a better candidate in the state of Florida than Val Demings. She has put herself out there in public service in pretty serious ways for a long, long time, and only then decided to run for Congress and now for Senate. Val Demings has demonstrated that she is an excellent executive as chief of police, somebody who believes the importance of law and order, somebody who is committed to our nation's security, and somebody who, unlike Marco Rubio, is absolutely not a career politician who has merely moved from the state house to Congress and sort of perpetuated his existence election after election. I wish that we had more people like Val Demings, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, people who have put meaningful time in public service, not in elected positions, and then chosen to offer themselves up for service. I think Val's got a great chance, and I think Marco Rubio has overstayed his welcome in Florida.
It does seem, Mike, that Rubio has become a little bit more, at least serious about the race. I think some would say desperate, but certainly he's buying a lot more ad time, 1.3 million up today, and now is looking, like this is going to be his serious challenge in November.
Well, you should always take a race seriously. I mean, he's a senator for a state of now now almost 22 million people. It's a very important job. He has been at a high level of politics for over a decade, really 2 decades. He was the House Speaker before he ran for the Senate. He came from behind in the Senate race. It was a 3-way Senate race against, I guess, our Democrat gubernatorial likely to be nominee, and he beat him, and he beat Kendrick Meek in the 3-way race that no one really expected him even to get out of the primary. So don't count Marco Rubio out. I don't see desperate. I saw him at the Sunshine Summit. I'll be seeing him tomorrow. And the one thing I think that Senator Rubio has is he has this underrated charisma when you're in the room with him. When in 2018, just before I was elected, we were kind of hanging out in a green room together, and I asked him for some advice on how to be an effective legislator, and he said, specialize in something and be a resource to your colleagues. And it was some of the best advice I've ever gotten from anyone. And I'm not particularly close to the senator. I've met him a few times. But that one piece of advice has been very valuable.
Specialize in something so that you can be a better resource to your colleagues, to other lawmakers.
To other lawmakers, and be a specialist in something. And I said, well, I know about the Constitution. I know about the laws. I'm a litigator, and I'm going to do that. And that's helped me tremendously in my career. And I just think a senator is a really good public servant. And what I'll say about Congresswoman Demings is I've been following I-4 politics for over a decade now. When about a decade ago, her and her husband were doing some good public service. They did check some of those boxes in terms of law enforcement and being a competent public servant. The last couple of years, what you've seen from the Congresswoman, she kind of got all wrapped up in this impeach Trump thing. And I think that went a little too far. She became a little bit more strident than the Val Demings that I knew. And I don't mean personally, but just watching her on TV and reading what she's saying and doing. And so I don't know that as the voters get to know the Congresswoman on a statewide level, that's going to resonate as well as perhaps there was a poll or two that suggested that this might be an interesting race. So that's the way I see things.
You don't see it being a close race?
I think Rubio's probably going to win by about 10 points. And remember,
10 points is not even, that's a blowout in Florida.
That's a blowout. But remember, Rubio usually does better than the governors. When he's on the ballot with a governor or he's on the ballot with another statewide election, he usually does better. The last time was, remember, 2016. Remember, he ran for president. He came up a little short on that, and then he came back into his seat late. He obviously cleared the primary against a gentleman from a little bit south of here. He did have a primary challenge, and then he came into the general, and he beat a sitting congressman, and he beat the congressman by about that margin. I mean, it was a good margin. I wouldn't say, what did you say she did in the primary, runaway? It wasn't a runaway, but it was a good, close to or about double point margin. So.
Interesting. Well, we'll see. I mean, certainly see what happens in this race. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think you're going to see a lot of outside money come into this race for sure, because there are a lot of people in the National Party for Democrats, I think, who want to see Rubio unseated. And so it'll be interesting to see how that race shakes out as we get closer to November. JB?
Yeah, no, the next race up is District 13, and again, sitting at 97% here with Anna Paulina Luna with the lead over Kevin Hazlett.
Yeah, I can't get into the Pinellas County election results, which is a little, I think their website is down right now, which is definitely not good.
Curious for you guys' thoughts on this. You know, one of the things that Mike mentioned earlier is the way in which Governor DeSantis has worked effectively with the state legislature, and he has, for sure. But also, one of the things that Governor DeSantis has done effectively is illustrated by the congressional district race that we just saw up on the screen, CD 13, which is to say, sort of ensure that districts were drawn or redrawn to benefit the party in power. When that happens, it perpetuates the party in power, makes it easier to work with whoever the co-equal branch of government is, but it also has a way of preventing any other candidates, any other elected officials from the other party, in this instance the Democratic Party, from winning a local office or a regional office and then aspiring to run, potentially win statewide. You know, Congressional District 13 was completely cut in half in a transparent manner, so it'll benefit the Republican Party, almost ensure that there will be a Republican winner. I mean, Eric Lynn is unopposed now in the primary because Ben Diamond, a very serious Democratic opponent in the primary, right, dropped out when the district was redrawn because Ben assessed that the district was no longer winnable for a Democrat.
And Michelle Rayner Goolsbee the same way, also did that.
Right. So, you know, look, not to be the professorial type talking to students about, gee, what's the right way to govern a country or govern a state, but it does seem to me that there's a place to have the voices of Republicans and the voices of Democrats represented. And when structures are changed to prevent that from happening, you know, there's a segment of the population that both is underrepresented, disconnects a little bit, and I think we see a diminished value of the democratic process. So,
yeah, I'm interested how you would respond to that, Mike, because certainly if you look at 13, there's no question that it was drawn to include more Republicans, and it no longer contains sort of what I think people would think of as this contiguous area of St. Petersburg. It's now, you know, reaching up onto just the coastal side of Pinellas County, and then the flip side of that is that 14, which used to just be Tampa and up into Hillsborough County, is now partially St. Pete and goes across the bay to Hillsborough, which may not even survive legal scrutiny. We'll see, obviously, what happens. But how would you respond to what Chris is saying?
Okay, so there's a lot you guys have said to unpack, so let's go step by step. Pinellas County is almost 1 million people, so you don't fit into a congressional district. You're going to have to split it north-south or east-west. You have to split Pinellas County into at least 2 districts.
But how does it possibly make sense to split it east-west versus north-south?
It was like that the last time before the court threw out the maps. It went from Tampa to St. Pete.
No one's doubting that gerrymander's been going on for a long time. And by the way, and I say that knowing gerrymandering happens on blue sides and red sides.
This is the first time that we drew the maps without regard to any of the impermissible factors. This is the first time that the legislature followed the law perfectly, that we've withstood every legal challenge that's been thrown at us, and it's been 4 or 5 months now. They sued us before we even did the maps, okay? And they've been suing us ever since. And each one of their challenges were turned away in the DCA. On the first DCA, Judge Tannenbaum said that the trial court judge was wrong to do what he did, and he sent it back with different instructions. Okay, and so these maps, unlike all the other maps,
state appeals.
they didn't take the congressional maps did not take race into account. They followed county lines, or in the case of Pinellas County, they followed 34th Street, which is a major. When you drive up, it's like a 6-lane highway. I mean, it's got lights, but it's a major thoroughfare. It was a completely legitimate way to draw the maps. We spent a lot of time. We had a lot of maps. We had a lot of discussions. We had a special session on this, and the maps were fair. And
but wait, but let me challenge you on that, because you all drew the maps.
We drew the
maps.
maps.
And then you accepted the map that was presented by the governor's office.
I maintained that the maps that were drawn by the House, which I did not agree with those maps, and those split Hillsborough County up too much. And we got maps that split Hillsborough County up less. And I was one of 8 House members to vote with the governor to not do a gerrymander that the House leadership wanted to do. And I paid a penalty for that, by the way, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I think the maps that we did, that the governor presented, that we passed, that have withstood court scrutiny thus far, and that will continue to.
We'll see. We'll see.
What prediction have I made on your show that's not been true?
I mean, I don't keep tallies, but
Okay.
but I do think it's going to be interesting because look, we saw a congressional district that went across the bay be held unconstitutional last time. So I'm not sure whether that will withstand.
And that
legal
was a different
scrutiny.
one because it went from Tampa and then it went down and scooped South St. Pete.
Which is pretty much
This
what
one,
14 does now.
This one brings in Feather Sound, parts of Clearwater, all of Snell Isle, and then downtown St. Pete.
I think that may be a tiny distinction without a difference.
These maps look a lot better. They follow geographic boundaries, county lines. They do exactly what the voters intended over a decade ago when we passed fair districts. We followed fair districts to
I
a
think there
T.
were a lot of people who would disagree with that. I mean, Chris,
they
I'll
can
hand it back to
disagree.
you.
These maps did what Governor DeSantis intended them to do, which includes, in addition to ensuring that there'll be a Republican CD13, ensuring that Stephanie Murphy doesn't run for re-election.
Four black Congress people down to likely 2 out of those maps on the Democratic side. I mean, that could be problematic.
If the Democrats lose in November, it's because what they've been doing the past 2, 4, 6 years, not because of any maps that we drew.
I'm not ascribing results to the maps, but I do think that there does seem to be people like, for people like me who sit in the middle, I'd like to see an impartial, body draw the maps where we're not taking, where we're taking much more local cultural significance into account when we're drawing maps than we are into who's going to win and what the breakdown is of Republicans and
I don't
Democrats.
necessarily oppose that. Frankly, doing the congressional maps drew a ton of oxygen out of the room. It resulted in a lot of litigation, which we've already talked about. It was a huge distraction, and it became something that a lot of us had to struggle with, coming between our colleagues in our respective chambers and the governor and what the court's going to do. And I had to do a very rigorous constitutional analysis and frankly stay up late at night and figure out what I was going to do and make sure I was doing the right thing on something that's a very technical thing. I don't necessarily disagree with you, and maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but I don't necessarily disagree with you that we could have another method of drawing the maps.
Okay, fair enough. JB?
Yeah, we have some breaking news. NBC News is projecting that Charlie Crist has defeated Nikki Fried in the Democratic primary for Florida governor, setting up Charlie Crist against Governor Ron DeSantis in November. So really quickly, your reaction on this live stream, and we're going to take a quick 5-minute break after we get your reaction. They're also calling Demings, of course, no surprise there, and Alan Cohn winning District 15 on the Democratic side, and Laurel Lee winning it on the Republican side, again, District 15. So, Evan, your thoughts as we kind of wrap up this live stream. We're going to take a quick break and then, of course, break back into programming.
Before we do, let's hit one other race, and you're going to kill me because I didn't prepare you for it.
Okay.
We
What do you
won't
got?
have a graphic, and JB is going to be mad at me about that. First, Chris, your reaction
Well, just
to this.
my quick take is, to overstate it perhaps just a bit, is Nikki Fried maybe the only Floridian surprised by the result? I mean, Nikki Fried was, in some respects, an accidental winner in 2018. She ran, as some would say, a single-issue candidate, legalized marijuana, didn't really have a background that caused anybody to think, gee, that should be the next Commissioner of Agriculture. This campaign was run on something as amorphous as something new, and not much more than that. To me, this result is a result that was probably in the bag, months ago.
Yeah, no surprise here, I think, for most people. And I would say it's interesting you brought that up because I've heard many people say that. In fact, I heard a Republican political analyst say one time that the Republican in 2018, the candidate for agriculture commissioner, lost that race more than Nikki won it. If you all remember, and even if you don't, that race was tighter than almost any race I've ever heard of. 5,000 votes less than separated Nikki Fried from the Republican candidate. It was a hand recount. I mean, that's in a year in which Governor Ron DeSantis only won by 32,000 votes, which also resulted in a hand recount. I mean, you're talking about less than 0.5% in that race. The agriculture race was like 0.1%. So a really tight race. And most people kind of ascribe that to the fact that voters thought she was running on a platform of legalizing marijuana and that marijuana had to do with being the agriculture commissioner, when in fact in the state of Florida, the medical marijuana field is regulated by the Department of Health and not the Department of Agriculture. So
there were a number of flukes in 2018. It was a very unusual cycle. It was a very close election, certainly at the top of the ballot, and some of the other races as well. Wasn't a great year for Republicans. We did lose some House seats that year, although the damage was mitigated. What I'll say is, Nikki Fried was
Good evening, everybody.
Concession speech here from Nikki Fried. Let's go right to
nobody ever broke a glass ceiling on the first pitch. I just got off the phone with Charlie, and I congratulated Charlie Crist this evening. And it's still reverse. Look, we fought really hard in this campaign. Every single person that I met along this campaign trail, we gave them hope, we gave them inspiration. And I know that every little girl that I met on this campaign trail, every little girl, I gave them something to look up to, something to look forward to. And I know that we are not going to stop fighting. I have been a champion and a fighter for the people of our state my entire life. And while tonight did not go the way that we all hoped it had gone, I know that tonight is the start of a new chapter for the state of Florida, a new chapter for so many of the women that I've met on this campaign trail. And another promise that I made on this trail, and the things that I said, that for every woman whose shoulders that I stood on, the fight that you all had for generations, that baton has been passed to this generation, and we are not going to stop fighting. I do not back down. And we are going to make sure that on the 2024 ballot, that we are going to have that right to privacy, that new constitutional amendment that I have been promising to people all over the state is going to happen. We are not going to back down. And the other promise that I made to everybody is that we are going to make Ron DeSantis a one-term governor and a zero-term president of the United States. And this is a time that we as Democrats are going to come together. We have to be united like we have never been united before. And I will campaign up and down the ballot to make sure that Democrats are elected into our city and county commission seats, into our statewide elected positions, into our senators, and into our House members. Tonight is about building a bench, and we are not going to stop fighting. So now I am asking every Democrat across the state of Florida, make sure that you are talking to your family. Make sure you're talking to your friends, because we understand that democracy is on the line in November. Democracy, everything that we have been fighting for. every little girl who has left a country for tyranny, we have to keep fighting for. For every black entrepreneur that is up against a rigged system, we have to keep fighting for. For every teacher who wants to teach, we are going to keep fighting for you. And for every single mom who can't afford their rent, can't afford their property insurance, we are not going to back down until we restore democracy here into the state of Florida and we reverse 28 straight years of one-party control of our state. So I have a couple of thank yous. First of all, to my family. To my family. And to that little girl. Every day I wake up and I fight for her. Every day I know that we have to build a better future for the next generation. And I also want to thank all of my staff that are here in this room. Because while I get to do these speeches, while I get to be in front of these TVs, you are the ones every single day sacrificing your time, your energy, your families, and you had faith in what we were building here. And so I thank you for that. And to Mitchell, thank you. Thank you for passing the baton on to my generation. We are not going to let you down. And I do also want to have two other special shout outs. Kevin, Kate, Matthew Van Name. Kevin was with me in 2018, and we've never looked back. We have started this fight, and Matthew, you took a leap of faith, moved your family to Tallahassee to become my chief of staff. And then you left to become part of this campaign to help create this movement. Because that's what this is. This is a movement. And just like all the women that came before me and all the women that came after me, movements don't happen overnight. Change doesn't happen overnight. So we get up tomorrow and we continue the fight that we have started. And we continue to fight for the future of our state. So, to everybody who's here tonight, to all of my sorority sisters that are here, and another thank you to the Democratic Black Caucus. I would not be standing on this stage tonight if it wasn't for you all. If it wasn't for the black voters in 2018 who campaigned to get me as Commissioner of Agriculture. And I have been so honored and so blessed to be your only statewide elected Democrat. And I know that this is just the start of a very long future that we will have together, and we will do it together. So thank you, everybody.
Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried right here giving her concession speech, saying she just got off the phone with Charlie Crist and congratulated him on winning this Democratic primary for governor, thanking her supporters, thanking people who have been there for her over the past 4 years, particularly people like Matthew Van Name, Kevin Kate, who've been running her campaign, and people who have been with her over the course of her Florida ascendancy into the Florida cabinet, and now it looks like her exit, at least temporarily, from Florida politics. Nikki Fried conceding the Florida Democratic primary for governor to Charlie Crist. A lot going on right here on our WFLA Now live stream, but not a lot of races still left in the balance. One that we are looking at is in Congressional District 11. Incumbent Republican Congressman Daniel Webster actually looks like NBC News has just now called him the winner in District 11. But for a while there, it was looking a little dicey with Laura Loomer, who is sort of a firebrand conservative who decided to challenge him despite him being a longstanding incumbent, also a former Florida House member, Florida Senate member. And now we're also looking Congressional District 15 on the Republican side. Former Secretary of State Laurel Lee has been projected to be the winner in what is Florida's new seat in Congress, Congressional District 15, which covers the northeastern part of Hillsborough County, the northwestern part of Polk County, and the southeastern part of Pasco County, the new district that's drawn because of the growth in population in our area. It looks like Laurel Lee will be the nominee there, and she'll be going up against Alan Cohn, a former investigative reporter who's running for this seat, has run for it several times before, has run for Congress, I should say, several times before. This seat is new. There are the results there from Congressional District 15. Alan Cohn looking to come out the winner here in that race. And so they will be going against each other in November, it looks like. Laurel Lee against Alan Cohn. We're also keeping an eye on House District 13 for Congress. On the Republican side, Anna Paulina Luna is the Republican candidate there, endorsed by former President Donald Trump. It looked for a while like former prosecutor Kevin Hazlett was going to make this a tight race. There was a lot of negative campaigning at the last few weeks in this race. They were really going after each other on air and in mailers. And Amanda Mackey with a strong showing there, 17%, and that probably dug into Kevin Hazlett's results there. Anna Paulina Luna looks like she will be the nominee on the Republican side in District 13. That is the open seat that has been left open from Charlie Crist running for governor. And she'll be going against Eric Lynn on the Democratic side, a former Obama staffer and national security advisor. JB?
Evan, we're going to reset our live stream here, folks. Reset on Facebook to bring you the victory speech for Charlie Crist. In fact, here is Charlie Crist speaking now.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great ticket. You know, tonight Floridians nominated Val Demings to be the first African-American woman to represent Florida in the United States Senate. And together, we are going to make voices heard for you again in Washington and Tallahassee. I want to thank Nikki Fried for fighting the good fight for the last 4 years in Tallahassee. We share the same goal, to save our state and defeat DeSantis. Hey, listen, you know this as well as I. The stakes could not be any higher for this election. Our fundamental freedoms are literally on the ballot, my friends. A woman's right to choose, on the ballot. Democracy, on the ballot. Your rights as minorities are on this ballot. That's what's at stake in this election. Make no mistake about it. Because this guy wants to be president of the United States of America, and everybody knows it. However, when we defeat him on November 8th, that show is over. I no longer recognize the leaders of the Republican Party. They're extremists. They want to turn back the clock on our freedom. They're trying to undermine our democracy in ways no one could have ever imagined. That stops here. That stops now. And it stops the hard war. This is the most consequential race in the history of our state. And when we win in November, we will send shockwaves across this country. I proudly served as the governor once before, and unlike the current governor, I represented every Floridian. Regardless of what political party they belong to, or how much money was in their wallet, or even who they loved. Together, we made it easier to vote. We stopped huge electric rate increases, and we lowered insurance premium costs on your property. We fought the special interests, and together we'll do it again. We can unite Democrats, independents, and many Republicans who care about our Florida, and we will defeat Ron DeSantis. When I'm honored to be your governor again, we'll build a Florida that is a Florida for all of us. Together, we will restore our precious freedoms that Ron DeSantis is taking away. On day one of my administration, I will sign an executive order protecting a woman's right to choose. We will stand up to the special interests and finally lower your electric bill and your insurance bill. We did it before, we'll do it again. We will protect your right to vote and make it easier, not harder to vote. Election day in Florida should be a statewide holiday. We will protect the rights of small business owners to do what's best for their employees and their customers. That's the American way. And when I'm governor, I will restore Andrew Warren to his duly elected position. The truth is, this governor couldn't care less about your freedom. He's abusive. He is a bully. He is a bully. And he's dangerous. He is dangerous. He imitates the worst authoritarian leaders on the globe. And it's all a political game that he's playing. He wants to appeal to the extremists across the nation as he seeks the Republican nomination for governor in 2024. He won't condemn hate or extremism, like the Nazis running around our state waving his flag and spreading anti-Semitic hate. Are you kidding me? And he stays silent when his own lieutenant governor calls for Cuban migrants to be bussed out of our Florida. Guys, this is simple. Governor DeSantis only cares about the White House. He doesn't care about your house. So don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by the DeSantis propaganda machine. He doesn't promote freedom. He takes freedom away. We can put a stop to this wannabe dictator. If we work together, stand up to this bully, we will defeat him in November. And this is true. This is true. We welcome Democrats, independents, and Republicans to join us in this fight. Everyone who wants to protect freedom and protect democracy, who is tired of getting screwed by powerful special interests, we need your help. Together we'll restore decency and civility to the government of the state of Florida. I try to live by the golden rule. It is my North Star. Everyone should be treated the way you would like to be treated. And I pledge this to every Floridian. I will listen to you. I will respect you. And my door will always be open to you. Because you're my boss. The people. A great president once said that our government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. I believe that in my heart and soul. The people are the boss. Since May of 21, we've been at this for a while. We've been building a campaign for all Floridians, and we need your help to pull this off. Together we can make history, and we will shock the world. But this is a unique moment in time. This is a special night. What happened here was not a mistake. And what happens November 8th won't be a mistake either. So raise your voices. Let's work like hell. Let's fight for actual freedom. And let's bring our beautiful state back together. God bless you. God bless you.
Charlie Crist with a victory speech and an early night victory over Nikki Fried. Our streaming coverage continues on WFLA Now, your local election headquarters, in just a few minutes. We'll be right back.
Your local election headquarters will begin momentarily.
It's Florida's primary election night, and the results are in. An early night for Florida, at least. Charlie Crist is your Democratic nominee for governor. He will take on Governor Ron DeSantis in November to see who will become Florida's next governor. Welcome to the WFLA Now stream on Florida's primary night. It's our Battleground Florida primary edition. We're live tonight with me, your political anchor, Evan Donovan. Also, we have Democrat Chris Hunter. We have Republican Mike Beltran. And we have a special guest joining us now. Peter Schorsch, the publisher of Florida Politics, is also with us on the Zoom, and digital anchor JB Biunno. So let's talk about the big matchup in November. It's going to be Charlie Crist versus Ron DeSantis. Peter, we'll go to you first. Does Charlie have a chance?
Did the New York Giants defeat the New England Patriots in 2008 at the Super Bowl? Yes, and I'll tell you why I know. I was in New York, and I had bet heavily on the Patriots to win, and I got doused with water by all those Giants fans. All it takes is one guy catching a football on his helmet for the undefeated to become vulnerable. 9 times out of 10, Ron DeSantis is going to beat Charlie Crist. It appears like there is something in the water nationally post-Roe. I'm not going to bet on Charlie Crist, but I'm not going to count him out either.
Certainly not a guy to count out, particularly not with his record in Florida politics and his record as a politician in general. Mike, we'll go to you first for a contrarian view. What do you think?
Well, look, I'll agree with Peter on this, that elections are like boxing matches. They're like trials. There's a reason that you actually do them rather than just sit there and say who's going to win and then pack up and go on to the next thing. So obviously we run elections. Just as Nikki Fried came up a little short tonight, she never really caught. She never a lot short. She never quite caught up to the front runner. I don't see it happening in the general either. I think the governor's the presumptive front runner. That's what all or nearly all of the polling says. That's what Peter used something about the taste of the water. I think the smell in the air is a landslide for the governor. Now, a lot of things can happen in 9 weeks, but I think it's probably 90%. I think that's probably about the odds that if I were the bookmaker,
that you would put it at.
I would put it at.
Chris, no doubt that the governor is polarizing. Charlie is not really that polarizing. I mean, I would say on the Republican side, obviously they don't like the fact that he has switched sides and don't like his policies. But I think in general people like him, even if they don't agree with him. How far does that go in November?
It's the $1 million question, because if there's any one thing that could catapult Charlie past Governor DeSantis, I do think it's his likability factor, his lack of an antagonistic personality or an aggressive approach. Charlie's somebody who is well known for many, many years as being a thoughtful, even-handed, decent person. Irrespective of where he might be on any one political position or policy position. And there's something to be said for having somebody in the executive branch leading it who is there to sort of deliver good governance and to restore a sense of civility and decency to our public sphere, rather than somebody who seeks to both create and then capitalize on any division, big or small, to further political ambition.
Peter, Florida has been thought of, at least in national political circles, for so long as being very purple. But in the state races, it's been red for a long time. Is it still purple enough to give Charlie a good shot?
What's the difference between purple and red? Whatever that color is where Florida is right now. We've seen the voter registration numbers improve for Republicans. I think a lot of people came down during the pandemic from the north But we're still talking about a state where Ron DeSantis did win by 33,000 votes out of millions of ballots cast. Bill Nelson only lost by 11,000 votes. Anybody that's not named Donald Trump, it's been, I think, less than 60,000 votes. If you look at the sum total of all the votes over the last 20 years, the top of the ballot, if you take out Trump, if you include Trump, it's less than 100,000 votes difference. So Florida's going to Florida. It's going to be close. There's going to be a lot of media attention. I think the thing that Charlie Crist has going for him is, number one, Val Demings. She is going to have a heck of a lot of money. She's going to be able to turn out the black vote for him. Number two, I'd say that the national picture has improved so much for Democrats over the last 6 weeks. You're starting to see, Rick Scott's in Italy right now, yachting off the Amalfi Coast. But meanwhile, the Republican Senate campaigns are pulling money out of Pennsylvania, Arizona, et cetera. And so that money then starts flowing to Florida. Let's see where this race is at the start of early voting in about a month. I will say this, I am expecting Charlie Crist to get hit over the head over the next week by millions of dollars in negative ads from national Republican groups and probably Ron DeSantis' campaign itself.
You're going to see a lot of negative ads, I'm sure. You're going to see a lot of Charlie's old statements and positions come to the forefront right here. By the way, a reference there to some of the possible financial mismanagement at the NRSC, and there are a lot of Republican campaigns upset about that, Mike. Let's talk about that since you bring it up there. Val Demings versus Marco Rubio. We heard Marco Rubio just talking a little while ago when we were in between live streams here. Your view of that race now that it's obviously clear that Val will be the nominee?
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter was talking about the color between purple and red, and I think Florida's a pink state. It's a pink state now. It's moved.
Oh, so it's communist? Wait a second.
It's pink.
The most conservative member of the
between purple and between purple and red. That's pink. That was the color you were searching for. But and it's pink and it's moving. It's moving red, and I don't know why the Republicans share that color with some people that we disagree with. You'd have to go back 50 or 100 years to figure that out. But I think that, as we were talking about in the first segment, Rubio also he kind of has the Crist factor. He kind of there's a certain charisma to him that maybe lets him outperform a little bit. Compared to other people from this party.
I will say, Mike, you brought this up earlier when we were talking about this, and I've seen it happen with people that were unexpected. Look, I met and covered Rick Perry during the 2016 presidential race and found him to be a lot more charismatic in person. I think politicians in general usually are. I don't think that comes across for Rubio telegenically. I don't think it comes across that way. In the room, maybe, but not over the TV.
It hasn't come across for Rubio because if you see him in person, if you're talking to him one-on-one, you see him at a dinner with 1,000 people, it comes across. It hasn't come across telegenically because there have been two kind of freak things that happened. One was the thing with the water bottle, right, when he gave the rebuttal to the State of the Union. Rule that Rubio is extremely charismatic, but unfortunately that's what people see. And I think you're going to see in the next 9 weeks, you're going to see the real Marco Rubio. He's going to be more charismatic than Demings. He's a very affable guy, and I just don't see Demings getting there. I don't see Demings getting that close. I know there have been some polls, but the polls have been wrong, and I just don't see. I don't think if there is one of those black swan events in this election, I don't think it's Rubio that falls. I think it's somebody else.
Chris, let's go to you real quick before we go to JB.
I think it's going to be a super close election. I think Val Demings, as I said, the first segment is in fact the real deal and all that means. I think that both of them will campaign hard. They'll both be well funded. And I do think that the margin of victory, whichever one of them wins, is going to be within 1 to 1.5%.
I don't think that that we gave enough credit to Charlie for how much the black community was supporting him throughout this race. And that really, I think, is what counted Nikki out from a long time ago. Let's go back to you, JB.
Yeah, I want to show you guys these social media poll results. This is pretty fascinating. This is our Facebook poll results showing, now we asked, of course, who will win the Florida governor race in November. And our Facebook and our YouTube poll results are very similar right now. About 70% for Ron DeSantis, about 30% for Charlie Crist. saying hello to some of the folks joining us, like Annette, Claude, Charlene, Rhonda, a lot of folks joining us on the Facebook page. I also want to get to somebody who's speaking live right now. Let's just check in for a couple of moments with Governor Ron DeSantis.
When I made sure that people wouldn't lose their job based on whether they wanted to take a COVID shot or not, they attacked me. They wanted people to lose their job. And so, yes, we've seen low unemployment. We've seen economic growth. We see the biggest budget surplus in the history of the state, and we can be proud of that. But just understand, we were very close to going a much different direction. Don't take any of this freedom for granted. You got to fight for it. We need to win across the board in November to make sure that we solidify this state as the nation's citadel of freedom. And I can tell you this, we are going to be running awfully hard all across this state, and we are going to generate the biggest Republican turnout this state has ever seen in a governor's race. And we have no choice, because if we don't do it, what is the alternative? You see all across this country leftist politicians destroying our society. They're letting criminals back on the street, refusing to even prosecute people for violating the law in different parts of the country. These prosecutors that are funded and elected with help from people like George Soros. Well, I can tell you this, we don't tolerate that in Florida. In fact, we had somebody over in Tampa that was a prosecutor, said he didn't have to follow the law. I removed him from office. We're not going to give an inch on public safety. You have a right to have safe streets, and that means we've got to support the men and women of law enforcement. We got to make sure that we do like I did, sign legislation preventing local governments from defunding the police. And we are not going to ever let cities in the state of Florida burn down like they did in Minneapolis, like they do in Portland. In fact, in the state of Florida, if you're rioting, looting, you're engaging in mob violence, don't expect a slap on the wrist. Expect the inside of a jail cell.
And that was Governor Ron DeSantis speaking, not even tomorrow, guys, speaking quite literally within an hour of Charlie Crist being named the Democratic winner on the, of course, the Florida primary night. So Governor DeSantis speaking, and we'll, of course, have that for you on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, but want to send it back over to you guys. As we look more and more at our comment section as well, we'll pay close attention to some of the comments we've got coming in on our Facebook Live and YouTube Live comment section.
Yeah, please do, JB. That would be great. Peter, I want to go back to you first real quick. You heard Governor Ron DeSantis there hitting some of his greatest hits from the past few weeks and the past few years. Obviously, voters in Tampa are gonna have an interesting time with what they do with the governor. I think this area, as always, going to be key in November. You see it that way as well?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm just so covered up in hope and promise listening to Ron DeSantis speak there. I mean, it's almost Orwellian how frightening Ron DeSantis is on the stump. And I just, somebody on his team has got to kind of say, hey, listen, you got to lace in a little bit about the future and puppies and apple pie. I mean, they're just, man, the guy just, there isn't, I mean, he's just so aggrieved as you're listening to him. Again, you know, he has got, you know, the Hillsborough voters, you know, it's very interesting. And the more I think about it, and I did like Representative Beltran's op-ed on it, I thought it was doubly disingenuous of Ron DeSantis to remove Andrew Warren after the candidate qualifying period, where something could have, or excuse me, a period where we could have had a special election. He knew what he was doing in there. He's installed somebody who, listen, the voters elected Andrew Warren not once but twice. They were comfortable and supportive of what he was doing with his office, and now he's installed, you know, basically an acolyte of his. I think if you had Andrew Warren versus Special Attorney or State Attorney Lopez right now, I bet you Andrew Warren would win that race 2-1.
I bet you he would too. Mike, I don't want to get too deep in the constitutional issues because we could go all night on that, but I will say no actual cases in which he refused to prosecute. He signed a pledge, but there wasn't anything actually in front of him that he refused to do. Does that case stand up in court?
Well, let's talk about who he installed, because he didn't install his political acolyte. He installed somebody who worked under Andrew Warren until she went on the bench, and she saw what a bad job, unfortunately, and I'm sorry to say, that Andrew Warren did as a prosecutor. She was one of the faithful prosecutors in that office, and we recommended her to the county court bench, and Governor DeSantis appointed her. She served for a little over a year, more or less, and then DeSantis appointed her to the bench. So I don't see how that's, respectfully to Peter, I don't see how that's his political acolyte. It's not like—
Well, he appointed her, I think was his point. But more importantly, Andrew Warren, again, no cases in front of him. This isn't like Ramos Ayala, which we need to get to as well, and we're going to hit Peter for around the horn around Florida in just a few minutes here. But Ramos Ayala is now your Democratic nominee for Attorney General, who will be going up against Ashley Moody, who is also from the Bay Area, in November. But Ayala refused to prosecute death penalty cases. Rick Scott took her to court, took those cases out of her jurisdiction. That's not what happened here.
I'll give you some cases that he had in front of him. I'll give you the case of the Fishhawk kidnapper who tried to pick up young girls in Fishhawk and take them away, and was stopped only by the intervention of some civilian churchgoers. He didn't even make a motion to detain that man pending trial. There was another case in my district. One of my constituents was shot in the back of the head. The trigger man in that case got no jail time, got the equivalent of a suspended sentence. And then Andrew Warren set loose dozens, if not hundreds, of rioters.
But I don't want to get too far into the weeds, though. But for the people sitting at home, I just want to kind of keep it a little more high level. Is it a negative for the governor that he's removing an elected official in a place where that official was pretty popular among most voters?
You said no cases. I've given you the cases.
No,
I don't think
the case
it's a
about
negative,
him.
because if Andrew Warren wanted to run on the platform of not enforcing the law, he would have said that during the two campaigns that he ran, where his messaging was very different, and he's correct, he won, not by that much, not by as much as the governor's going to win his reelection, but he won, but his messaging was very different than what was actually delivered, particularly in the last 2 years since 2020.
Okay.
We've got Anna Paulina Luna speaking. Let's listen in here live.
I have 104 messages.
Oh, you think? This?
I have to go and each respond back to all 104 of them. I have a list of people I have to call. I wish, like, copy paste.
As we're waiting here
Mic
for
check, mic check, mic check.
this interview to begin, this is the watch party for,
I'm sitting,
again,
you can
Anna
sit
Paulina
down.
Luna.
You're good.
No,
you're good, you're good.
And we'll come back to this when the interview actually begins. Any thoughts real quick, Evan, on Anna Paulina Luna as we wait for her to begin the interview?
I want to, before we go to Anna Paulina Luna, let me just go to Chris to respond to what Peter and Mike said.
Well, look, I served with Andrew Warren in the United States Department of Justice. Andrew Warren is one of the finest prosecutors that has done the job when he was at DOJ and also when he's been Hillsborough State Attorney. Ron DeSantis acted autocratically in removing Andrew from office. He was elected freely and fairly by the voters in Hillsborough twice, and he ran on a criminal justice reform platform that included exercising discretion vested in state prosecutors, and I was one of those as well, to prosecute those crimes that are the most serious. That's exactly what Andrew did with Chad Cronister's support, with the support of the judiciary. That's not a new. That's nothing new. But the remedy, if people don't like the approach that Andrew has taken, is to run somebody against them. The remedy is not to have the governor unilaterally overturn the results of 2 elections. To me, that's a perfect example of Ron DeSantis going where he doesn't need to go for political purposes, but instead going to the place of maximum advantage for the purpose of furthering his own political ambitions.
It would be difficult
Really
to see
quick,
it
Evan,
happen.
this
Go
is
ahead.
Anna Paulina Luna. We'll come back to you just a
So
second.
we now go up into Tarpon Springs, and so I really look forward to a close relationship with Representative Gus Bilirakis. But not only that, I mean, this is an incredible opportunity, and I really hope that people who typically wouldn't get involved in politics, that they come around, hear what we have to say, and I'd love to represent them in D.C.
And thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, a few words there from Anna Paulina Luna, who is your Republican candidate in District 13, a newly drawn district that used to be filled by Charlie Crist, who obviously is now going to be the Democratic candidate for governor against Republican Ron DeSantis. All right, Peter, let's go back to you since this is your homeland. You're the St. Pete guy, Pinellas County. What's your view of what happened here? Did you think Kevin was going to be a little bit closer?
Yeah, a little bit closer, but I think you saw the national groups, specifically Club for Growth, come in with a massive television buy. And if you tracked that, you could see that they put in the reservation a month ago, and they closed it out. I mean, they dumped, I think, upwards of $1.3 million against Kevin Hazlett. There was just no way that he was going to recover against that. She also was endorsed by Donald Trump. So in a way, you could say that Kevin Hazlett probably outperformed given Trump's endorsement record so far in GOP primary elections.
And then let's think about let's bring in Crist again here to talk about her opponent. Eric Lynn is the former national security advisor for President Barack Obama. You worked in the Department of Justice, Crist. I mean, this is a guy who obviously has a track record. Does he have a chance in this newly drawn district?
Absolutely. Eric does have a chance, but it's going to be a difficult district for him to win in because it's been drawn to almost ensure that a Republican will prevail. So looking at the results on the screen, quite frankly, I think whether it was any of the top three of those candidates, any of the three of those Republican candidates are more likely than not going to win that seat. Eric has been running a terrific campaign. He'll run a terrific and strong campaign into the general. He's well-funded, thoughtful person, and he has a shot, just like Charlie Crist has a shot against Governor DeSantis.
Does he have a better shot than Charlie does?
I wouldn't call it a long shot, but it's sort of somewhere in between.
Okay. Should we expect to see President Obama on the campaign trail?
I doubt it.
Really? Okay. He hasn't done much of that since leaving office, so I don't know that he would be down in Pinellas County, but interesting nonetheless to see whether he comes. Peter, what else are you looking at? What statewide surprised you? We talked a little bit about the Attorney General's race. Ramos Ayala, Daniel Uhlfelder didn't get really very close. I think maybe not as close as people thought he might get.
You know, I think it's a win for the establishment throughout Florida. If you're looking at both the Republican and Democratic primaries, down ballot, I see a lot of people. I see people like Eric Aguilar against Aaron Bean in Northeast Florida losing. I see Anthony Sabatini, one of Mike Beltran's best friends, losing in CD7. I see on the Democratic side, I see anti-gay candidates losing in House races. I see people that voted consistently with Republicans like Daisy Morales losing their primaries. I see Lauren Book, the Senate leader who was challenged, winning her primary. And so as much as we will have these candidates are probably a little bit further to the right and to the left than maybe 10 years ago, the center held, as it usually does in Florida. There's so much money spent by major organizations to kind of weed out the far right and far left candidates. Now the Republicans will, they'll dominate the Democrats in a lot of these races, but the difference between a lot of these candidates at this point, it isn't as much as we would like it to be.
Chris, you wanted to say something?
Peter, this is Chris. Quick question for you and for Mike and Evan. You're speaking about the center holding, and I'm really intrigued by what David Jolly and others have been doing with the Forward Party in the last 30, 45 days. As we look ahead past this election in November, Peter, do you see any future for the Forward Party in Florida or more broadly?
I mean, that's a good question, but I just don't. In fact, I look at, the local news site that started Axios. They started with a big scoop about how David Jolly was going to run for governor, and that just never materialized. And, I think to Mike Beltran and his colleagues' credit, there aren't a lot of GOP incumbents that have lost or have been unseated. We want to turn this into blood sport, and I love it. Don't get me wrong. But it doesn't seem like the voters of Florida are very upset when you see 90, 95% of incumbents win. I just don't see any state house Republicans being unseated here at this point, state senators either. I see them moving up or eventually just running against each other, and one goes home and one usually goes to a county commission spot.
Mike, let's go to you.
Well, yeah, I think we're going to have a pickup. I think we're going for the supermajority, and I've spoken to the speaker designate about that, and he's a great leader. He's going to command the resources necessary for us to pick up an additional 2 to 3, maybe 4 seats in the state house, and I think the Senate is looking very good as well. In fact, you have a lot of unchallenged incumbents or people with relatively commanding presence going into the general. I think we had 30 House members, most of them on my side of the aisle, who were reelected without opposition. And there are definitely some opportunities for pickups in the state house, and we've been kind of building back our majority that we slipped a little bit, and now we're approaching the super majority that we once had. So I definitely think that is well within reach. And
I just want to jump in real quick and argue with my good friend Representative Beltran. Be weary of that super majority, my friend, because I remember Speaker Corcoran was at that level, and there are not enough. There's not enough there's too many mouths to go around. And in fact, Speaker Corcoran had said, that it wouldn't. I mean, he didn't say it aloud, but it was whispered that it wouldn't have been bad if 5 or 6 House incumbents had lost, because there's just only so many appropriations that you can give out, only so many committee chairmanships to go out around. So be careful what you bite off there, my friend.
Well, I've never gone for the chairmanships. I've never gone for the appropriations. I just go for good government, and other people may be into those type of things. So I'm not concerned. Maybe some of my colleagues aren't happy hearing that.
I want to jump in here with the tightest race of the night that we have yet to talk about. It's only specific to Hillsborough County, so obviously it doesn't cover all of our viewers here in the Tampa Bay area, and I know a lot of you are joining us from around the country and around the world. But right here in Hillsborough County, which is the county Tampa is the county seat of, the school tax referendum is right now within about 1,000 votes.
This is insane. I'm going to chime in here and just talk about how insane this vote is.
And look, I think there's a lot to be learned here. First of all, we're in the midst of historic inflation, 40-year level highs of inflation. You're also got a situation where the Hillsborough School District has mismanaged its finances over the past few years. Voters gave themselves a tax increase in 2018, 2 of them. One for transportation, one for schools. And I think it's very interesting to see in, what's become a fairly reliably blue county, Mike, that voters are saying, nah, I'm not sure that I'm going to let you increase my taxes anymore.
I'm going to quote my good friend to the north, State Representative Lawrence McClure, who won his primary, fended off a primary challenge tonight. So congratulations to Lawrence if you're listening. What he always says is, it's more and more and more. They want more and more funding, but we don't get more and more education. Even when we get more and more students, they're not building new schools. They're not building schools fast enough in my area of the county. They're cutting the school buses. The teacher salaries are being raised at the state level. We're the ones who are doing that. They're not doing that at the county level. And every time there's an issue at the county level, despite the increasing taxes, I tell them a constituent needs this, that, or the other thing, and there's always an excuse that there's not enough money. Then X $100 million goes missing under the previous administration. After we did the infrastructure increase in 2018, we did the transportation tax. At one point, Hillsborough was the highest tax jurisdiction in the state, which is a shame. And it hurts me to go up to, we talked about appropriations. One of the reasons why we can't do good appropriations, and maybe this will change, but we go up to Tallahassee and I ask for something for some school buses, and they say, you're the highest taxed county in the state. Why can't you pay for that at the county level? And so actually we're taxing ourselves and then putting ourselves at a disadvantage when we go up to Tallahassee. And then they do things like the mask mandates that put them edgewise with the governor, and that didn't help the situation. So we need to look at ourselves, and it's not just more and more and more. We need to be smarter. And the voters have said that enough is enough. We need to get our fiscal house in order. And unless and until we get rid of that waste, fraud, and abuse, they shouldn't be going back to the taxpayers, particularly in this type of economic climate.
I want to just chime in here. Our team confirming that the vote on the Hillsborough school tax referendum, this is too close to call, despite 98% being in, a separation of approximately 1,000 votes. So that final 2% of votes to be counted will be key in determining whether or not the Hillsborough school tax referendum passes.
And this goes counter to the rest of the state. As I'm looking through the rest of the results, Duval County, Southwest Florida, Orange County, all of the voters, even in conservative areas, are voting for increased taxes for schools, infrastructure, et cetera. I mean, it's one of the defining trends right now of Florida politics. even though we're a conservative, leaning state, that these local voters continue to pass referendum to tax themselves more.
Yeah, I'm looking at Pasco County school tax passing by a wide margin here, Peter, 58% to 41%. You have some other ones around the state, as you mentioned. So it certainly seems like a specific pushback against Hillsborough schools. And obviously, we don't know whether it's going to pass or not. Too close to call at this point. But I do find that very interesting that this is the closest race of the night.
You've just had the last two precincts come in and the margin widened for no.
Wow.
So I think that one is DOA unless they do something on a recount. And in fact, I think if there's any contest of this, what's going to come into play is, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I usually agree with him, but the administration of the school board kind of used their office to try to influence this referendum. And I know a lot of my constituents, not only were they against the tax increase, but they thought that that tactic was also inappropriate.
Interesting. So we Addison Davis was in here in our studios advocating in favor of the tax. You're saying that you had people reach out to you that they didn't like that?
I don't mind the superintendent going and asking for the tax, but they were calls that went out, and it seemed like people were just sending their kids to school, and then they were getting messaging about what is really a political issue. It's something at the ballot box. It would be like me sitting in the Capitol and calling and trying to raise contributions or something, or you have a fundraiser at your office or your legislative office, something like that. It just seems like you're using the government apparatus as opposed to your political resources in order to advocate for something. And I'm not so sure the superintendent should have been doing that. I thought he did a decent job during some of the challenges we had in terms of getting the fiscal house in order. I think he kind of went open kimono with us in a closed meeting, and I guess it was with us, with the delegation, the legislative delegation, and the previous administration did a very poor job on that. But then things like this, I haven't spoken to him super recently, but it wasn't his best moment.
Let's circle back to where we started with the governor's primary. Peter, I had, Richard Harrison, when we were on Battleground Florida a couple weeks ago, brought up the fact that you had Nikki Fried, who seemed to be, if not a rising star, at least a rising player in Florida politics on the Democratic side, runs for governor, then obviously loses tonight. What's next for her? I mean, is her political career in Florida over?
No, of course not. Charlie Crist has lost. I think he's only won one more race and he's lost. Nikki Fried, a lot of folks lose races, Jeb Bush, etc. I think she's got a very lucrative private sector career ahead of her. Unfortunately, I think that by suing the Biden administration, one of the many mistakes that she made during her campaign, I think she's kind of walled herself off from something in D.C. I imagine that we'll see Nikki Fried as, the president of some sort of like crypto bro, medical marijuana concern, where she gets some huge stock options. She's an extraordinarily bright woman that was a statewide elected official in a industry and with a background in an industry that's only going to boom. I bet you in 20 years, Nikki Fried's going to be a lot wealthier than any of us on this panel.
You heard it here first. Peter says crypto bros, president.
Yeah.
Nikki Fried.
Yeah, there you go. Some sort of crypto bro marijuana firm. Okay. Chris, what anything that sticks out for you tonight? What looking forward to November?
Well, I'm going to put in a plug for Governor DeSantis when he goes out in the campaign trail to be as in favor of law and order at the federal level as he is, as he says he is at the state level.
As a former FBI employee?
Well, I was an FBI agent and a federal prosecutor and served with many great men and women who aren't political but are only focused on one thing, which is keeping our country safe. Governor DeSantis has spent an awful lot of time beating up Andrew Warren, a former federal prosecutor, and has spent virtually zero time defending the FBI or the Department of Justice, despite the fact that there have been many politicians, elected and otherwise, who have been outwardly criticizing the FBI in such extreme ways that has created sort of a permissive environment for violence. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, tragically, that there were two FBI agents here in Florida who were murdered. It was February of 2021. Two FBI agents were shot and killed serving a warrant in Miami, north of Miami. You know, what I find, quite frankly, inexcusable and intolerable about the political discourse in the last 2 weeks, especially in Florida, is the lack of respect for the rule of law out of people like Ron DeSantis. So my hope as we look ahead to November is that Governor DeSantis decides to recognize the importance of federal law enforcement to protecting Americans and Floridians.
I will say, Mike, it was not, or Peter, we'll go to you next, but it was definitely not a good look when you juxtaposed Governor Ron DeSantis going after my colleague, Masa Saidi, here at WFLA, when she asked if he knew about the Rebecca Jones raid ahead of time, and he defended those agents. They did their job with honor. It was not a raid, it was a search, and you know they were executing a warrant, and yet he was calling the quote-unquote raid on Mar-a-Lago a raid and bemoaning it. Obviously, there was only, to be fair, there was only one of those search warrant executions where people went in guns drawn, and it wasn't the one at Mar-a-Lago. Now, people might say, well, Rebecca Jones didn't let them in for 20 minutes, and that's why the FDLE had to go in guns drawn. But I certainly think that it was, even the average voter on the Republican side said to me, no, that wasn't good.
You know what else is really really disturbing is, we've got all these, we had a press conference about 20 felons who were basically misled into registering to vote, and we're going to prosecute the hell out of them. But I hear nothing from the Republicans about two of their candidates on the ballot tonight who threatened to kill federal agents. Like, I don't understand why we just can't all universally condemn, Martin Hyde, who was a congressional candidate, backed by Roger Stone, running against Vern Buchanan, and then the House District 20 candidate who said that he would kill federal agents. And I just, we're so worried about some poor, ex-con that is so interested in the process that they registered to vote, but we're just doing nothing about these extremists, these near terrorists up and down the battle.
I thought it was also interesting. I had former Secretary of State Laurel Lee in, and we talked about the 2 or 3 ghost candidate, fake candidate schemes on the Republican side in the state Senate. Asked her if that was something the election office was going to go after, or whether they should even go after, and she stayed fairly non-committal on whether or not that should be something that's looked into. The governor announces that he's going to go after these 20 ex-felons. Again, I heard nothing about these 2 candidate schemes that certainly Republicans would be very upset about if they happened on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, well, let me say a couple of things. First of all, everyone needs to follow the law. That includes cooperating with law enforcement at all levels of government. That includes following the election laws, and that applies to people on my side of the aisle, people on the other side of the aisle, and people who are still deciding where they're going to be in November. So that's number one. Number two, you brought up Rebecca Jones. Breaking news there is she beat 60-40 Peggy Schiller, who tried to sue her off the ballot.
After just getting back on the ballot from the appeals court on Friday.
After just getting back.
on Monday.
Yeah, exactly. It was yesterday. My case came out on Friday.
That's right.
I won my case on Friday. That's what you're thinking of. But so there were 2 congressional cases that were in litigation. The other one was local, and we'll see what we're going to do about that one.
So we're going to have, just so for those of you at home, because you might have heard these names before, no matter where you are, we're going to have Rebecca Jones versus Matt Gaetz in Congressional District 1 in the Panhandle, which is quite the race.
Yeah, and we also have some other interesting results. We had Daniel Webster just was very close in the initial results, but he's fended off a challenge from Laura Loomer.
You know who called that, by the way? You know who said that?
Was that you?
Short guy. It was that short guy who, and it was funny because I had his lead consultant, the fundraising consultant, like call me up and complain, like, how could you say that Danny Webster is going to be in trouble? And I'm like, have you been to the villages lately? Do you see what's going on over there? And so it's a surprise, but it wasn't a big surprise that Laura Loomer was able to kind of get traction there.
Another one that was certainly no surprise, but just deserves a shout out. Gus Bilirakis has fended off another primary challenge. He's local here, and there's a couple other interesting races that we've talked about during some of the breaks. I think you talked about Sabatini and a couple of the other ones. Martin Hyde coming up short against Vern Buchanan. We touched on that one as well. He had issued some comments recently.
Yeah, well, not only issued some comments recently, but also had some run-ins with law enforcement several months ago. I don't think it's any surprise that he lost given his record there. I want to bring in our new Capitol Bureau reporter.
She's on standby. She's going to be coming in shortly.
Okay, we're going to get to Libby Dean, our new Capitol Bureau reporter, in just a few minutes. I want to introduce you all to her. Peter, any final thoughts though before we let you go?
Why do I have to go? I told you I took a 5-hour energy drink. No stop to Brooklyn on this one.
Well, I tell you what. So let's talk about this one real quick, because we haven't talked about it yet. Aramis Ayala beats Daniel Uhlfelder. I think obviously he didn't bathe himself in glory going around the state as the Grim Reaper. I think that voters remembered that and probably saw it as more performance art than it was serious candidate. Do you think he suffered from that, or do you think Ayala had better name recognition? How did you read that race?
I think that remember that 30% of the Democratic primary is African American voters. She had probably a bigger statewide profile than he did from her time as probably one of the most prominent Soros-backed state attorneys, target of the right, and so. Charlie Crist turned out a lot of African-American votes. So did Val Demings. All of that went to Aramis. And so I also think, Daniel Uhlfelder has some personal money. I didn't see a lot of that flow into this race. $500,000, maybe $1 million could have made a difference.
All right. Peter Schorsch, publisher of FloridaPolitics.com. Peter, thank you so much. I will see you on Friday. He will be on this Sunday's show of Battleground Florida, and we'll see you then. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
All right, let's go back here. Chris Hunter on my left. Oh, that would be your screen, right? I guess. And Mike Beltran, state representative in here. Guys, any final thoughts from you? I know I went to you, Mike. How about you, Chris?
Look, I hope that we've got some good races to focus on as we get closer to November. I hope that the results are going to be close, and I hope that voters decide to start paying ever closer attention to not only what candidates are saying, but how they're saying it. And if that happens, then I think that the governor's race could be close. I think the Senate race will be close, and maybe some of these down-ballot congressional races could be close.
I hope the voters start to pay more attention as well to state house races. I've said this to you before. I know I've said this to you before, Mike. I really think that COVID was the great exposer, the great civics lesson that everybody needed to understand that the state that you live in has a lot more of an effect. The governor of your state has a lot more of an effect on your life and the legislature than who the president is or who your representative in Congress is. And I think it's very interesting that people are now starting to understand that. It's a process. 20 years ago, most people didn't know what a filibuster was, and now everybody does. And so I think you're going to start to see more of a focus on the state political level. I hope that turns into more votes.
And that's the way the founders intended it, right? I mean, the federal government was supposed to be limited powers, and the state government was supposed to do most of the governing. And the states created the federal government, the United States, not vice versa. And we've kind of, in the last 100 years, we've kind of lost touch with that. But so the state and the local is really where it's closest to the people. And if you can, that's where you should try to keep the issues. There are some interesting local races if you just want to go through some. So Patty Rendon in school board District 4, that's out in East County. She will be the school board member. She cleared the three-way primary with over 50%. You have Stacey Hahn fending off Damaris Allen, almost 2-1.
Interesting.
And that was a seat that was redrawn locally by the local authorities in order to make it more competitive for a liberal, but the more conservative candidate has fended off in dramatic fashion that challenge. And then you had that four-way county court judge group 14, and it looks like Mike Isaac and Melissa Black are going to make the runoff there. Lynette Brookins, Star Brookins, was very close, third. And then Alicia Whiting-Bozich had almost 14%. So that was really anyone's race. It's still going to be a very interesting heads up. And then Judge Tibbles has fended off a challenge.
And where are we in the Smith race?
The Smith race it looks like it's going Jacob's way, and it looks like they are going to avoid a mandatory recount. So the margin widened just a little bit. That was a race where the Planned Parenthood got involved in favor of, I guess now Judge Jacobs. Judge Smith was originally appointed by Scott to the county court, and then he was promoted by DeSantis to the circuit court. And there are some openings on the appointments angle, so he may compete for those. But
yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting.
So,
actually.
and it just kind of goes to like whether we really want to have these contested judicial elections where the political issues are polarized. It's one thing for the legislature, the governor. It's another thing, but the judiciary is supposed to be a little bit more insulated.
More insulated from that. That's a great point, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, even though we just did. But yeah, it is very interesting, and I know the governor supports a Hamiltonian view of he should be the one appointing them, and obviously judges being elected makes that a little bit more difficult. JB, let's go back to you.
Yeah, I want to get to those poll results again one more time here while we have an opportunity to do so. We're going to be wrapping up our stream here in about 10 minutes. We've also got Libby Dean standing by from Tallahassee. We've had this poll blow up. This is now up to 3,000 plus votes. Who will win the Florida governor race in November? 73%. This has climbed about 3%, 3 points in DeSantis' favor. An unscientific social media poll, we know, but still interesting the night of the primary to get your reaction here, folks, on Facebook Live. And our Facebook audience does tend to lean conservative, more, of course, than lean blue. 73% for Ron DeSantis, 27% for Charlie Crist. I want to shout out some commenters that have been using the hashtags, of course.
Did we ask it on Twitter, by the way?
We did not ask it on Twitter.
Because normally we have a Twitter audience that skews left, and we have a Facebook audience that skews right, and we can kind of end up somewhere in the middle. But I just was interested to see that.
I just want to shout out some commenters here. Starting here with Nick, hashtag HJB, says DeSantis is the best for Florida. Nick, thanks for watching and commenting along. Michael says, hashtag HJB, none of the above for governor. Thought that was pretty interesting. Someone who's not in favor of DeSantis or Crist. And this one for you, Evan, from Patrick Fox. Hashtag Hey Evan, for Crist's sake. And that hashtag, not entirely sure what exactly that really is. Is that a pro-Crist comment? Is that a negative Crist comment?
I don't know.
But I thought that was interesting. Some of the comments, and saying hello to all of our commenters joining us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. If you're still with us online, you're a diehard political Florida.
Yeah, I love
fan.
it.
No doubt.
And therefore, if you are diehard, let's bring in our newest Capitol Bureau reporter. This is Libby Dean. She joins us now live from Tallahassee. Libby, I want to get kind of your initial thoughts on tonight's primary results. I know you had a chance to speak this morning with Nikki Fried, as well as with, you got a chance to ask Governor Ron DeSantis a question. Take it away.
Hey, Evan. So, yeah, I was able to speak with both of those candidates today. Well, now we know that Crist has shown up and Nikki has not. And when I asked DeSantis today kind of what his projections were, that is exactly what he projected. So here we are kind of seeing that play out.
Yeah, and certainly he's now going to be facing Charlie Crist, and looks like he's, the governor obviously confident that he's going to win. What was Nikki's mood like this morning, and what did you think about her concession speech here tonight?
When I spoke with her after she voted, what was interesting was she, she was very cheerful, obviously, walking out saying, "Oh, who did I vote for?" That kind of thing. But I think that has been the voice of her campaign. They've been very on social media like that, and just very supportive of Crist still. I think that the concession from her was very cordial, normal.
Yeah, I certainly think it. Mike, can I repeat what you said?
I'll repeat it myself. I think she was very un-Nikki Fried-like tonight. She was very
That's not how you put
it. She was very stateswoman-like tonight in her concession. I will say that about. And if she had, if she had dealt in Tallahassee the way she dealt tonight, she may have come off as more affable to the voters, and she may have been closer to the nominee. And I don't agree with anything she said, but it was just a different tone than she's taken in the 4 years in Tallahassee. And I think, as Peter said, she'll go on to something. I'm sure she'll be successful, but it's not going to be as governor.
Chris, do you see it that way? I sort of looked at it as I thought that was her play, was to be more aggressive and to sort of try to swing voters and grab that group of voters who were upset and wanted change and really hated DeSantis. Obviously, we're talking about voters on the left here.
Right, I agree completely. I think that she sharpened the sword at the beginning of her primary campaign and sharpened it even further as she went along, because that's how she saw her path to victory in the primary and ultimately her path to raising the money necessary to try to win in November if she would have survived the primary. You know, she was on MSNBC early and often, and in doing that in a way that is designed to really raise your profile in the same way Governor DeSantis did it on Fox before he became elected governor. I think that's what she was sort of looking at as her pathway.
Yeah, and it didn't work out for her. It kind of shows, obviously, that voters were thinking something different. Libby, go ahead.
Yeah, Evan, I was going to add one thing that came from Nikki's side is that she obviously had some bitterness in that meeting today with the board. And I picked up on that, obviously, because she, I think, would have preferred, obviously, to be out campaigning, but didn't have that opportunity because of that meeting.
Yeah, for those of you who are watching at home, there was a cabinet meeting, a Florida cabinet meeting that the governor called for today on primary day when there hadn't been one in several months. Certainly a power move by the governor there, Mike. I think other people might call it something more harsh, but clearly it was, you know, kept her off the campaign trail at the beginning of her day. I don't think it mattered with the result that we saw here. She wasn't going to find 400,000 votes elsewhere, but
She ran for the cabinet 4 years ago. She's running for the cabinet tonight. She doesn't want to go to cabinet meetings.
I didn't say that. I was just saying that it's interesting scheduling from the governor on primary day.
I couldn't be able to speak to that. I don't know how that works. Maybe someday.
Do we know how far in advance that was scheduled? That meeting was scheduled, Libby?
Go ahead, Libby.
I think there was enough advance. I think that this was something that DeSantis did to keep her off the campaign trail, but ultimately, I don't think that this would have changed anything, you know, as we can see.
Yeah.
And so why do it then? Why do it? Why take that maximum advantage approach in every way all the time? Why does
it's very on brand.
Why does he govern that way?
Yeah, that's DeSantis's style. You know, he really he makes those kind of moves, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that is what he does. You know, today after when we spoke with him, all of the press, we actually, out of rare occurrence, got a good amount of questions in, and he didn't walk around them too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, more of that to come in your world, Libby. Libby Dean, our newest Capitol Bureau reporter, we very much appreciate you joining us here on primary night. Libby has a bright future ahead in Florida politics, and we are excited to have her on the team here. JB, any final thoughts here?
No, grateful to all the folks that commented along with us on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and I'm also very grateful to our analysts, Representative Mike Beltran, of course, Mr. Chris Hunter joining us here. It's been a pleasure to have you both on stream and to pick your brains and learn a little bit and strap in, right? Buckle up, because we've got a crazy few months ahead as far as Florida politics. Very curious to see how things kick up. Not in the weeks ahead, but really in the days ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gonna get interesting very quickly. We certainly remember what happened. I believe it was the day after primary night 4 years ago when Governor DeSantis went on Fox News, and there was the controversy about the monkey this up comment, and that immediately sort of kicked the campaign off as soon as it had already gotten going. I mean, literally the next morning. So I expect that we're going to see negative advertising, full-fledged campaign ads. We've already seen some of them, and I think it's going to get hot in the kitchen pretty quickly.
Well, let's end out with this. I would like to hear Mike and Chris's thoughts on this, because this is going to be fascinating when it does come around. Of course, WFLA is preparing for the debate that is going to occur between Ron DeSantis and Charlie Crist, the governor's debate in advance of Election Day in November. What does that look like as far as Ron DeSantis and Charlie Crist? You have, of course, the current governor against the former governor. We know Ron DeSantis' style based on, of course, his remarks at pretty much every press conference over the last year plus. So, of course, his style against Charlie Crist's style. What kind of debate are we going to get as we get closer to November?
I'm kind of thinking Trump versus Biden. I think you're going to have, I think the governor's going to run all over Crist. And, he's not that great of a debater. The last time we really saw him debate was back in 2010. And debating was not what he did well. He didn't do anything particularly well in 2010 or during the 4 years he was I don't know what he was, but he was governor. I don't know what kind of governor he was. But I think it's going to look like that. I don't think Crist is going to beat DeSantis on the debate stage.
Well, we know how that turned out, though, in the general election afterwards. I mean, do you see it playing out the same way? Because I feel like Charlie has put himself out there as, you know, the 2022 Biden to Trump to DeSantis as Trump. I think, and that's the game he's playing. Just like we were talking about Nikki's path that she possibly had to victory was to be more aggressive and to be attacking. I think Charlie has put himself up there as, hey, are you tired of DeSantis going after Andrew Warren or being really aggressive about this or that? Then I'm the middle of the road nice guy.
And then the question is that appeal enough
to win?
To win,
right?
You know, is our polity at a place where people are not going to engage in a meaningful, I'm going to show up and vote way for somebody who takes a middle of the road approach, both in substance and in style?
Well, they're not looking for a teddy bear; they're looking for a governor. So.
Well, but they may not be looking for an attack dog as a governor either. I think that's the point. Is that's the game Charlie's playing, and I guess only time will tell as to whether or not it's successful.
What a thank you again to our guests joining us on stream, and for those of you joining us online, the very latest results on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. But the one thing I want to end out on really quick before we wrap up this live stream, we got to show this one more time. This is perhaps the most fascinating race, not even a race, but really a referendum of the night. This is 99% in, 49.8% yes on the Hillsborough school tax referendum, 50.2% no. For those who are hyper-focused on this referendum, we encourage you to follow our own Nico Clemens on Twitter. He's, of course, been following this race very, very closely. He has updates on these final votes and whether or not this is has any chance of passing. But right now, for those who are really hoping for the Hillsborough school tax referendum to pass, things looking pretty bleak in the final minutes of our live stream.
And make sure that you catch WFLA News Channel 8 at 11. We'll have a live report from Nico. At last check, he was at the Hillsborough County Supervisor of Elections office, so he's where the votes are being counted. If you're going to get an update from anyone, it's going to be him, and it will be at 11, and we hope to see you there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you joining us on this primary election night coverage. Thank you to my guests, former congressional candidate Chris Hunter, current state representative Mike Beltran. It's been an honor. Appreciate you both giving me your time tonight. And I look forward to seeing you both again soon.
And really quickly, I'm just getting past here. It is going to be an automatic recount on the Hillsborough school tax referendum. So an automatic recount triggered. Latest on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. Evan, you want to send us off?
That's it. Thank you all so much for joining us. Don't forget to watch us at 11 tonight. And then, of course, Battleground Florida this Sunday. I promise it will be a good one. We'll see you later.
Take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching your local election headquarters. Thank you for watching your local election headquarters. Thank you for watching your local election headquarters.